Welcome to K11 Konversations, a multi-platform dialogue series where we discuss the intersection between creativity, culture, and innovation, in line with K11's social mission to incubate talent, propagate culture, and push the new frontier of art. In this session, we have invited artists Julie Progin and Jessie McLean from Julie and Jessie to discuss their approach to art and on finding beauty in the broken and the lost. Welcome, you two. It's great to have you here with us today. So before we begin, why don't you guys get started on telling us about yourselves, about your studio, and about your body of work.
Oh, thank you so much for having us. We are Julie and Jessie, and we're going to share our screen here to give you a little introduction about ourselves and about our work. So my name is Julie. I'm actually a Swiss national, but I was born in Hong Kong. I was raised in Hong Kong until I left for college. This is a few pictures of me traveling China as a kid with my mom and my dad. And this just to show a little bit of like how Hong Kong has shaped me, like, you know, a lot of influences from different places and from different cultures. I then went to study textile design. So that's me with my textile designs on the left in Paris for a few years. And then I moved to New York where I studied product design at Parsons. And this is where I started doing ceramics as an elective and also how I met Jessie. And then for a few years, I worked in merchandising and visual merchandising for cosmetic brands in New York, such as Stila and other brands. And on to Jessie.
Hi, I'm Jessie. I grew up in Northern California. My family bought a piece of land out in the country and decided to build our own house. And my father had never built anything in his life, so it was a very learning experience and probably shaped me quite a lot.
Yeah, what Jessie doesn't tell you is that he actually had to build his own room when he was very young because whatever he wanted in his room, he had to make. So that was a great learning curve as to how to use materials and learn how to work with different techniques and methodology, which I think kind of shows up in our work now as well.
I started doing ceramics very early on. This is a large sculptural piece done in Sweden. Before I went off to university.
So we met in New York in a ceramic studio, and we started our studio actually in Brooklyn, working together for about 6 months. And then we quickly realized that we wanted to produce more and to be closer to where porcelain originated and to be able to be closer to workshops, because we didn't want to produce everything ourselves. We wanted the help and to see what craftsmen were still doing. And the birthplace of porcelain being Jingdezhen in China, we thought like Hong Kong would be a very good starting point for us because I grew up here and my family's still here. So these are just like shots of our studio in Hong Kong. We're on the 16th floor of an industrial building in Chaiwan, which is very unusual to do ceramics up high like this. Generally, it's always workshops on the ground floor. This gives you a little bit of an overview. We work with a lot of different materials as well as ceramics. Our inspiration room and table. So we have a studio here in Hong Kong where we make all our prototypes and we also do all of our artworks. But we also set up a studio in Jingdezhen in 2008, which is where we went to discover what the city was like nowadays and to see what kind of craft was still happening over there. And we fell in love with the city and never left it. So we've been running 2 studios in non-COVID time, about like half the year here, half the year in Jingdezhen. Mm-hmm. These are shots of Jingdezhen. Wow. So Jingdezhen has been a very big source of inspiration for us. This is really how Julie and Jessie started. It's a city with thousands of years of history with porcelain, obviously where porcelain was invented and discovered. So you can see just an overview of some of our projects here, but on the left, we always have like our points of inspiration and departure, and on the right, what we've done with it. So on the left here, we have like piles of broken molds and shards that we found in Jingdezhen. And on the right, this is fragments, a piece we made from these broken molds. This is another example of it. Here on the left, we have like an abandoned metal factory in Jingdezhen, which is highly unusual since it's mainly porcelain production, but how the rusting metal and the traces we found in this abandoned place inspired the bowl on the left, and how we use these metals and the rust to actually make markings on our porcelain. Here we have eroded molds and teaware molds on the left, and how we use those to create unique libraries of porcelain cups here on the right. On the left, we have deformed and failed pieces that are laying all over the backs of factories in Jingdezhen, and how that inspired us to create our own failure in porcelain, and how we use that to make our vases on the right, which when they go into the kiln, actually they're normal vases, but when they come out of the kiln, they fail. And this is really, really interesting. And this is the last line, just to show you a little bit also about our experimental methods. We really like to push the boundaries of porcelain and not rely on just usual techniques. So this is what we call our library of mistakes. And this is like always a point of departure. It's things that failed or things we tried that sometimes don't work, but sometimes, most of the time, find their way into our work and as a point of departure.
So it sounds like, of course, failure leads the way to success, is what you're telling me here with all your works. And obviously, like, it's all really beautiful, even if they have failed.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I think looking at everything as a point of inspiration and not thinking of it so much as a failure, but just the clay went a different direction than what we thought it would go. And in Jingdezhen, there's thousands of years of failures. If you dig in the ground anywhere, you come up with, mistakes and accidents that can be hundreds of years old. And this is really amazing inspiration.
Yeah, so talking about Jingdezhen and talking about you guys going back and forth between Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a city of skyscrapers and rapid change, yet there are some enduring pockets of heritage and traditions that have remained for decades and centuries. And of course, so the same thing for Jingdezhen. So what is it about these two places that inspire you to create?
Well, for me, since I didn't grow up here, pretty much everything is inspirational in Hong Kong. And I think it's easy in your own city to stop seeing, but when you visit a new city, you see everything. And everything is inspirational. So I think because Hong Kong is has a long history of being a trade port, with multiple cultures coming and going and leaving their own bits of history and local history, this sort of floodplain of different cultures has developed Hong Kong into a really unique environment.
Yeah, I think this is something that really has been a point of departure in a lot of our work, especially in the latest work where now we've been stuck in Hong Kong for 3 years. So we've been really researching a lot of the history of Hong Kong and doing projects with that as a start point. And it's fascinating to see it as a trading port and how goods were transiting through Hong Kong and what that brought to the city, especially, for example, with porcelain. Porcelain is not native to Hong Kong, but goods were transiting in Hong Kong. So, for example, coming from Jingdezhen, you would have some whitewares But they were painted in Hong Kong and in Guangzhou before they left to go to, say, the US or Europe or something. So there is a long tradition of hand painting white porcelain wares in Hong Kong. And also because of the different cultures that like thrived in Hong Kong, from the style of painting and what was painted was quite eclectic and with odd different sceneries, with perspectives from the West, but landscapes from China. Like, so it's this kind of melting pot and fusion of different things and different inspirations that I think like has been a huge inspiration to us lately, especially. And I think like one project we'd love to talk about is the project we did with Design Trust that was inspired by Tiger Balm Garden, and which is now showing also at K11 Museum. It's called Terra Mobile, and that is the epitome of the eclecticness of Hong Kong. Yeah.
Yeah, so I have seen the Terra Mobiles at Musea. It's just fascinating to me that like you guys have made this like porcelain, and also it's like a rolly chair, and it's also like a carpet mixed in one. So I want to like talk about more about your Terra Mobile artwork. So I know it's like a reinterpretation of the Tiger Balm Garden. So from the yarn from the Taiping carpet production line, can you talk about the significance of remembering a place like the Tiger Balm Gardens with arts and what you guys have done?
Yes, absolutely. Let's share a screen to tell you a bit more about Terra Mobile. So Tiger Balm Garden was built in the 1930s in Hong Kong by the Horpar brothers, two brothers that founded the brand that was making the Tiger Balm ointments. So their family also came from China, but had like outposts in Myanmar and Singapore and Hong Kong. So like there was already a very big influence from different cultures. The park was built in Tai Hang Road. It was a park that was the first one made to it was open to everyone. It was open to all the public, and the aim of this park was to how would you put it?
Well, the two brothers, it was very important for the two brothers that the Chinese culture stayed alive in Hong Kong. And so their objective was sort of to re-educate or re-influence the Chinese influence. And the gardens were really quite amazing. There was no plan. It was built basically every day was a new day, and they just built whatever they felt like building.
So they had hired all these craftsmen, and without any plans, they said, okay, I want a mountain here, I want a cave here, I want this color there. And that's why this garden was quite unique. You can see in the pictures there, like already just the colors of the garden, but you can see here. So we chose these two pictures, one on the left to show you the uniqueness of the place. So basically it was all sculpted as one kind of fabric on a hill. So staircases transformed into caves, transformed into mountains and landscapes, all reminiscent of Chinese gardens and Scholar's Rock and landscape paintings. This is what really fascinated us, because you can move through it and you can rest on a rock, rests on stairs, on everything is like one fabric together. Like, and on the right, we chose this image because it's very Hong Kong. It's the most iconic place from the 30s until this garden was demolished in 2004. That Tiger Balm Garden was the icon for Hong Kong.
And I think this is quite interesting because it's the export of local culture. There's so many people that came as tourists to Hong Kong and brought that memory back. And so in a sense, that memory is living all over the world. even though it's a very local culture and was built for the local community, it's actually, in a way, global.
And what I loved about this project is that you don't know that, but I actually grew up right next to Tiger Balm Garden. So I would go visit like quite often.
Oh, no way.
So working on that as our point of departure was quite important to me. So we actually were tasked to create an object, a sculptural object that would go and live in the mansion, which we haven't mentioned right now. So the mansion where the family lived was adjacent to the garden, and this mansion actually still exists. It's now been transformed into a music school, but the garden was demolished. So we felt kind of sad that the garden was no longer visible, and so we really wanted to create a piece that when people visited the mansion, students of the school, parents, or anybody going there, they would be able to connect and imagine what this garden was like. And that was our point of departure for the Terra Mobile. And the idea was to build pieces that were just like the sculptural garden, that were at the same time rocks, mountains, and at the same time places to rest and to sit. So furniture and sculpture like all in one. And we decided to sculpt it the same way the garden was sculpted. So we had no drawings. Jesse sculpted actually each piece. You can see here videos of us making it in our studio here. Every piece was made very spontaneously with no plans, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, we felt that by putting it on wheels and making it would make it more interactive, and that the local culture and people that visited could play and build their own garden and make it their own. And this sense of play and interaction was really important for us.
And here on the screen, we have another portion to our Terra Mobiles, which is working with typing, which is another huge portion of heritage in Hong Kong. Typing is a pride for Hong Kong. They've been producing amazing carpets for a long time now. And so we work with them for this Terra Mobile to make a portion that would be carpet and that would be reminiscent of the completely psychedelic and crazy colors that those rocks were painted with in the garden, and also reminiscent of the topography of the garden. So this gives you a little bit of an idea of how those were made. We also used all the cutoffs from typing, which you can't really see in this video, but when they produce a carpet, there's always small cutoffs that are generally discarded. So we use that and mix it in with the clay to create a lighter clay that would be easier to work with and to build larger structures. And this is the results. Mounted on wheels, so it's interactive. So the idea is that, like, with all the different units, you can create your own Tiger Balm garden. Like, so families and kids and all sorts of generations are actually like interacting with the piece and creating their own garden and reliving the past through these pieces. And these are the ones at K11 Museum right now. So I encourage everyone to go see it. And this is a piece that we subsequently did, not on wheels, this one that's in the M+ Museum Lounge also as a result.
Very cool. And yeah, I love that, like, people, like, obviously art is something to be interacted with and to like elicit emotion, but I love that you guys just took that play and just like put it into the artwork. So talking about like taking the past and putting it into your artwork. A reoccurring theme in your projects is obviously taking something from the past, whether it's maybe broken or something that's lost, and creating beautiful pieces from it. So what is this fascination, or like this, the point of departure that you guys keep saying about the past, about the heritage and culture, and like what is something about that that's fascinates you guys?
Jump in.
Well, I think with ceramics, and especially porcelain, which is the material we've really chosen to focus on, there's a huge and very long and rich history that's also a global history. It starts with China, but then it radiates all around the world when porcelain was exported from China, and then traveling Silk roads everywhere. So I think there's that aspect. It's very interesting to look into the history of the material, but also I think what's been fascinating for us, and especially working in Jingdezhen, is that you're actually confronted with these different timelines. So in Jingdezhen, you have craftsmen that are currently reproducing, I don't know, Qing Dynasty, Song Dynasty pieces, to sell as reproduction. So you're actually seeing history being made again, but in the present for future generations. But at the same time, you've got young generations and students pushing the boundaries of the material and working with new technology. But all of this is looking towards future, but it's happening in the present. So we're confronted to these different timelines.
There's actually there's an interesting story of someone sent from the emperor during the Ming Dynasty to visit Jingdezhen and to visit the royal kilns. And he talked about this all the way back then, that there was people copying old work, but there was also this new and innovative work happening. So it's something that the city has always had, that it's always been sort of copying the past, but creating the future all at the same time.
Yeah, so I think that this is a huge point of departure for our work, but then also being confronted to the changes that are happening in every city. But in Jingdezhen, of course, things are moving fast. The city got UNESCO heritage in 2014, which means a lot of changes happen. And in those endeavors to make all these changes, some factories had to relocate or close. And we were present at the time, which means we wanted to document those changes and archive it in our work. We felt it was important because then nobody would remember what was once there at that very moment. So we'd like to share a small video of one of the works that embody exactly that spirit of looking at the past and the broken to make new work, if it's okay with you.
We've been working in Jingdezhen, the capital of porcelain. It has 2,000 years of history. We started working with a wine bottle factory that produced the ceramic baijiu wine bottles. They had gone out of business and had left thousands of the industrial molds for their production. We went in and collected molds that had been partially broken.
So the mold itself is very brittle, and they're manufacturing a very cheap product, since the pieces that are being produced in this factory are just then covered in glaze, and it's just a bottle for a one-time use.
This was our start point to archive these molds of this business that is part of the history now of Jingdezhen. Part of the beauty behind the piece is, of course, these lumps. They have come from the liquid clay going into the parts of the mold that are missing.
The longer I leave it in the molds, the thicker the piece will be. In 20 minutes time, we'll pour out, and then we'll wait a few hours and then we can unmold and get our cast.
In a sense, these are all a documentation of things that are not there. And of course, as more and more parts of that mold go missing, there becomes more and more features moving slowly away from the original archetypal shape that was used in the production of the baijiu, the wine bottles. So it sort of evolves into a new object. By taking those molds and using them, it provides a renewal of the actual mold, but it's also a renewal of these archetypal shapes that the wine bottle factory was using and has been using, but it's not exactly what the old was. So it's an innovation on that. By doing this act, we record the damages and changes to that mold. One of the most common questions is, why didn't you clean it off? This crazy protrusions. People think that it's damaged, that it needs to be fixed. But this is really the concept behind the work. By taking the industrial molds that have been broken and thrown out, the liquid clay finds its way into all of the missing bits of plaster and records the damage. So in a way, forever archiving the change and evolution of the city, of the industry, of time passing.
This is the one we were making when we were shooting the video. So you can see the first piece we made when we found the broken mold at the factory is on the top left. The last piece we made using that same mold is on the bottom right. And you can see the evolution of using that mold that keeps breaking because it's already broken and it's getting more and more fragile as we use it in our own production. So this is recording the mold like from its beginning to until we can't use it anymore. It's so broken, it's so gone that we can't use it anymore.
So the molds, like, are they just very brittle to begin with that they would keep breaking as you keep using it? Or is it just because of age and then it just decays?
Well, what they do is they recycle the plaster by heating it back up. But every time it's recycled, there's more and more carbon in it. So it becomes really fragile. But this recycled plaster is really cheap. So if you're running a factory, it's much better to be using this recycled plaster because then it's cheaper. But yeah, they break very, very easily. And the more you use it, the more water is absorbed into the plaster, making it more fragile.
Yeah, so your work is in a way a preservation of the lost. And what are your thoughts on how your pieces contribute to preserving old traditions and culture for future generations?
Well, I think our pieces always have a foot in the past, a foot in the present, and one in the future. We like to travel these timelines and to look at ways to be inspired by traditions and different cultures and history, and it speak of context and what's around us to make new work. But also, I think what's very important to us in the last 4 to 5 years now is to create pieces that are interactive, that engages the public into the work and find ways to engage people with history, but in a new and fun way, especially with ceramics. Traditionally, ceramics is pieces that sit on a shelf in a museum and that have a huge do not touch sign on it, because technically it's supposed to be extremely fragile, which is true in some respects. But I think encouraging touch, encouraging play, encouraging engagement is something we're very keen on doing right now. And that's a great way to engage people with our pieces, our work, but and to living the history, but in the future. We do have a piece we can show you if you'd like, that is called Pocket Garden, that is extremely interactive and very fun. So Pocket Garden is a piece that we made during COVID, when COVID first hit. And we were all stuck at home, and we were all longing to be out and longing to be in nature. And we also had no more kiln because we broke our kiln right before, so we couldn't get a replacement because nothing was shipping. And secondly, we couldn't get any materials anymore because there was no more shipping. So we had to really find a way to make new work with what we had in our studio. And that's how we came up with this new material using our very experimental methods. We recycled all the clay we had in our studio, and we looked for any organic material that we had to recycle in our studio. So it could have been food, could be, we still had some recycled yarn from our typing carpets from the Terra Mobile project we did before. And we mixed all of this, so you can see here a breakdown, into the clay, and fired big blocks of clay. And in the firing process, all the organic material burn out, and you're left with a material that has a lot of different features and holes inside. And we fired at a very low temperature, so we can then sculpt this material that tends to look like, in the end, like Scholar's Rocks with different features and textures and holes. So Jesse got very inspired by it and did a lot of research on Scholar's Rocks, on gardens, on nature, and how landscape, and with landscape paintings and Scholar's Rock, you look at an object in order to be able to travel, to project yourself in nature, which with COVID, we were all longing to do, which was the perfect thing to work on as a means to escape our studio and our home and to project ourselves somewhere else. So this was the first idea, and then we just started experimenting with the material. And the result is making these mini Scholar's Rocks, since we only had a tiny kiln to play with, and to mount them on wheels so that, and actually even better, that not only mount them on wheels, but mount them on Legos. So we hacked the bottom of each piece so they could snap onto Legos. And the idea was to create this intergenerational playset with Legos and our porcelain rocks. So you can build your own kind of Suzhou garden, or like play with like rocks and start understanding what it means to look at a Scholar's Rock, how to look at this tradition, and look at like the history and art history related to.
Well, I think it allows for a really nice teachable moment for parents and their children. And especially for me, coming from the West and really not knowing that much about this beautiful history of the Scholar's Rock, of the sort of this homage and poetic respect for nature in the landscape, the ink paintings and the actual rocks and the construction of gardens. And so by putting it on Legos, it makes it playful and fun for the kids to build. And it also allows for the parent to really teach the kids about this beautiful, rich history.
Mm-hmm. So yes, a way to, like, here's how it works. Yeah, a great way to like use the past and history and the lost, not lost so much in this case, but then to create something new with it that is interactive and for future generations to engage with history.
That's also a great way to share one culture with another culture. And, you know, all kids love Legos. So it's a really kind of great way to just make it fun.
And adults too, by the way.
It was very cool. Thank you for sharing all of your inspirations and the thought process behind your work with us, and obviously about your workshops here in Hong Kong and in Jingdezhen. For more K11 conversations on topics of creativity, culture, and innovation, follow K11 Museum on Instagram and Twitter for the latest updates. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Julie and Jesse, for joining us on this conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.